Hi, Yvette. All right. Well, welcome back to our ongoing training that we're building into the first 15 minutes of our supervision context. So where we left off before is we'd established baseline. And in this particular session, what I'm going to do is work through, sorry about that. I'm going to work through identifying everyday examples with you and like modeling it and then having you practice. And then because of the nature of this particular activity, I'm going to scaffold it into using that graphic for risk assessment right away, just to kind of put it together in a linear order. And then we'll also we'll work through that and have you model that as well.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll work through, I'll model, and then you will demonstrate. So here I'm going to talk through this. So a car is a location, it's an environment. Okay, and the main activity in that environment is, we're going to just call it for purposes of today's training, legal and safe driving. We won't get into the microscopic operation or operational definitions, but we'll just leave it there. And that's the main behavior that occurs in a car. Are you following that logic so far as the main activity? Okay. There's secondary things that can occur in a car, like listening to music. However, that is the main function of a car, is to get you from point A to point B. All right. Okay. So along that particular thought process, so if that's the main activity that me as the user is doing, what are things that could introduce points of disruption within that actual activity being accomplished, if that's the main feature of the car and the main behavior is driving? So here's some things I went ahead and pre-identified. For example, a tree falling on the road would block the path or interfere with driver driving and accessing the road. Or a tree could fall on top of a literal car, which could happen for sure, and then potentially harm the individuals inside. So the behavior of driving would cease, and then you introduce a level of risk to the possible individuals inside of it. Another one is drinking and driving or doing drugs impair safe response times to operate a vehicle in a legal and safe manner. So that's a known environmental variable that if you introduce it into your body, that competes with your ability to engage in legal and safe driving behaviors that then potentially pose a risk for other people and yourself in accomplishing legal and safe responsible driving. A third one is the use of cell phones, which pose a second activity that takes away from the singular focus of driving as the main behavior that occurs in a car. And so what that means is that the risk introduced is the person is doing something else versus having attention to the main actual activity to accomplish, which is driving, which is there's a lot going on just to drive in general. And so then you're not looking, you have competing behaviors that take away from your eyes being up, operating the vehicle. And so that competes with the main activity and feature of a car. Okay, so when we look at that, I'm going to now segue into showing you how you analyze that. So I'm going to take this item, the cell phone, and then the question you ask when you're analyzing risks is I'm going to ask myself is, I'm going to use the cell phone. So we'll take one of those three for the purpose of the actual model for you. And I'm going to ask myself, okay, is the potential switching back and forth between driving and taking my eye gaze up and down to another item, which is, let's say, using your phone as the second activity, is that something that is generally acceptable when you're looking at the environment of a car and the actual function is driving? Is that an acceptable behavior and or risk that the switching back and forth would take away from the main focus of driving? So the answer is no, that's generally unacceptable because that is not the main feature of a car. The car is to get you from A to B. The cell phone use is not the main feature that occurs in the car. Shouldn't be. It should be. So we would say that's generally unacceptable as something that should be occurring in relation to impacting legal and safe driving and the impact of taking your eyes up and down the road. That's generally unacceptable as a point of risk that would be introduced. Now, the likelihood, because we're looking at potentially something adverse happening that would occur because your eyes are shifted down. So the likelihood of something actually happening to drivers behind or other drivers on the road is that I would rate that as it's possible to happen, because if your eyes are off the road, it's possible you could end up in a car accident. So it's beyond not likely, because if your eyes are off, then obviously there's a point of potential, human error happening. It's not, also, I'm not saying probable, it's not going to happen every single time, but it's a possibility that could happen if your eyes are coming down off the road and coming back up for too long. So if we look at that, that would put us into the crosshatch here at high. We would say that's a high level of risk that requires that categorical ranking after looking at those two variables. Okay. Now I'd like for you to do, let's take grocery store as the environment. And
Okay.
I would like for you to tell me, and I'll type for you, what is the main activity that occurs in the grocery store?
Getting groceries, purchasing them.
Yeah, getting groceries, pretty straightforward. All right. What is the risk you can think of that would impact the user's experience for that main activity in that environment? Would impact your ability to get groceries?
The item out of stock.
Good, an item out of stock. Yeah, that's a good one. It's another one.
Oh, card declining.
Ooh, I like that one too. That's happened to me before.
Like sometimes if they're like remodeling and moving things around,
Okay.
like that can present like a potential hazard environment, or like if it's raining and then like everyone like treks in the water and like then you can like slip and fall.
Okay. So perfect. So weather, they're related. Water at entrance. Okay. Perfect. So describe to me how these things would impact, let's take your item out of stock. How would that impact the behavior of accomplishing the main activity of getting groceries? I don't know if I said that right. Describe it in like a linear A-B fashion. So if the item is out of stock, it
Cannot be obtained.
correct, exactly. Okay. So it's something that would disrupt the main feature or the main function in that environment. If your card is declined, it would.
You would not be able to obtain groceries.
Yeah, so you're not able to get that main activity accomplished. If you're walking into a puddle of water at the entrance, what maybe could happen?
You can get hurt.
So you could slip, and slipping is incompatible with physically standing up and grocery shopping, right? So that would disrupt. So let's take so good. Those are all potential risks that could happen. Some of them being more obviously adverse to the consumer experience, and some of them maybe being like a little bit ego, like a little bit of an ego hurt. But let's take the third one. So let's say you said weather related water, and let's okay. So let's have you go through this and tell me what your thoughts are. Is that an acceptable, tolerable, or generally unacceptable potential situation that would occur in a grocery store for someone trying to do the activity grocery shopping?
It should be generally unacceptable.
Okay. And why are you saying that?
Because it's a known safety hazard, and that's not an inherent, like that's not part of grocery shopping. You don't go grocery shopping and expect water on the floor.
Correct. So that's exactly right. So it's unacceptable to have water, just standing water at the front of inside of a grocery store, because you're not at a swimming pool, right? You expect water on the side of a swimming pool because you're there to get wet and be in the water, but you're not there to be in the water at a grocery store. So it's generally unacceptable because it's not part of that environment usually. Great. So how likely then, taking that first variable and going into your second one, would it be that there potentially could interrupt the person's shopping experience? So some people will walk in and walk past it, and then they may not encounter impact from it. But how likely would it be that someone could come in and potentially be impacted, meaning they would fall or slip?
It's possible.
Yeah, it is possible for sure. Right. For sure. Absolutely. So we would say that's a high level, and that means that we would rate that categorically as high. All right. Perfect. So we would want to continue going through this and doing multiple examples until you became demonstrated at least 10 of these without me providing any kind of feedback, where we do a baseline and we do a whole nother set of exemplars without me providing any kind of guidance or airless learning or prompting.
Okay.
Great. Do you have any questions before we move on to our next agenda item?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, wonderful.